Okay, rotation occurs when the system is restricted to move around a fixed axis, and so therefore in a circular path. And then general motion is a combination of the translation and rotation. There's two types of translation. There's rectilinear translation and curvilinear translation. Rectilinear is when the path of the system is in a straight line, and then curvilinear is when it's in a curved line. Motion is the change in position with respect to the spatial and temporal frames of reference. Translation is motion around all of the x, y, and z axes in which all points of the system move at the same time in the same direction with respect to the defined reference frame. Okay, so eversion is when your feet kind of go out, and then inversion is when they come in. And then next is, next is deviation, and that's with your hand. And so that's when your thumb comes together and then comes out. And then lateral flexion, that's like when, when your stomach bends over, so you're laterally flexing. And then, so then in the transverse plane, you have rotation to the left, so going to the left, and then rotation to the right. Then, so internal rotation is back at your knee, and so it's when your knee rotates inward. And then external is when it rotates outwardly. Protraction is when you're bringing your shoulder blades like that. And then retraction is bringing them back. And then pronation is when you have your arms this way. And then supination is like you're carrying a bowl of soup. So you just kind of dump it out for pronation and carrying the bowl for soup. And then, circumduction is one of the things in multiple planes. So it's kind of like your arm moving like that. And then pronation of the ankle, that would be kind of like the same thing as dorsiflexion. You just bring it up. And then plantar flexion is kind of like the supination of the ankle. It's going to be up like that. Okay, and then, an example of a closed skill would be like a football player kicking a football through a field goal, because the field goal doesn't move. The distance is the same from the where the field goal is to the goal line, and the kicker just kicks it. And then an example of an open skill would be like a basketball player that's dribbling around a defender to get the goal. Then, okay, I need to pause. Okay, so next is the planes. The sagittal plane goes through the middle of your body, dividing it into right and left halves. So with the book, it would be down the middle. And then the frontal plane divides you in half, and so it would go through your side and divides you into anterior and posterior. And then the transverse divides you into superior and inferior, so it would cut you in half. And then, so then the medial-lateral axis is movements along the flexion, extension kind of thing. So flexion and extension. And then the anterior posterior axis goes through the sagittal plane, so it's side to side, stuff like that. And then the superior inferior axis is circumduction, would be an example. Center of mass is just kind of the area. It's the point that represents the average location of the system's mass. So for humans, your hips and thigh bones and stuff will probably be the center of mass because it has the most weight. And then, so next is the movements in the sagittal plane. So flexion is just like that. Dorsiflexion is with your feet. And so, So it'd be having your foot like that and then pulling it up. So kind of coming up with it. And then plantar flexion is pointing down. It's kind of you're digging your foot in a hole. You're planting it. And then extension is when back up with your arms, when you extend backwards. And then hyperextension is like you extend, but you go like way too far, which could like lead to injury. And then, okay, so then the motions in the frontal plane. So abduction is when it moves further apart. So like your arms are abducting from your body. And adduction is when they come together. And then elevation of your scapula is when you bring it up. And then depression is when you bring your scapula down. So elevation and depression. Eversion is when you, let's see, this would be like with your knee and you like move it out. So it's like everted. Wait, can you pause it? All right, posterior is referring to the back side of your body. So an example would be your gluteus maximus is more posterior than your abdominal muscles. Then medial refers to like the middle of your body. So like your linea alba and like belly button would be on the middle. And then lateral is talking about the side. So like your arms on the lateral side of your body. Proximal is closest to the point of attachment. And so your elbow would be more proximal to your shoulder than your hand would be. And then distal means further away. So then the hand would be distal to the shoulder versus the elbow. And then superficial means it's more on the surface of things. So an example would be your gastrocnemius is more superficial than your soleus in your leg. And then deep would just be the opposite. It would be talking about the muscles that are on the inside versus the outside. So your soleus would be more deep than your gastrocnemius. Okay, and then the next thing is the planes. Okay, for anatomical position, you're gonna have your head facing forward, your palms out by your side, and your feet hip width apart. And then, let's see. Okay, so for superior, your head, an example would be your head being superior to your shoulders, so it's above it. And inferior would be your feet are inferior to your knees, so they're below it. Anterior is talking about the front of your body, and so, let's see. So an example would be like your sternum is more anterior than your shoulder blades, your scapula. And then posterior is the back side of your body. And so an example would be like your gastrocnemius is more anterior. Wait, hold on. Okay, for anatomical position, you're gonna have your head facing forward, your palms out by your side, and your feet hip width apart. And then, let's see. Okay, so for superior, your head, an example would be your head being superior to your shoulders, so it's above it. And inferior would be your feet are inferior to your knees, so they're below it. Anterior is talking about the front of your body, and so, let's see. So an example would be like your sternum is more anterior than your shoulder blades, your scapula.